Prohibition. Most envision hordes of scofflaws drunk out of their minds at speakeasies, bootleggers getting into shootouts with the police, and elaborate schemes to hide the smallest trace of liquor from the feds. And while these images hold truth, they aren't the whole story, as the history of the 18th Amendment is so much more than its romanticized reputation. The idea for an amendment that would prohibit alcohol nationally emerged in a period of rapid social and systematic change known as the Progressive Era. Throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the movement fought to reform American society and fix its ingrained corruption.
I'm a progressive. Greedy capitalists? Let's fix it. Unsanitary meat packaging? Let's fix it. Suffering laborers? Let's fix it. Poor immigrants? Let's fix it. Women without a vote? Let's fix it. Leave it to white, middle-class, educated Protestants to solve all your problems.
The movement for temperance, or the abstinence from alcohol, can be traced back to the early 1800s. The earliest temperance organizations were in 1808 in New York and 1813 in Massachusetts. By 1833, 6,000 local societies had appeared in various states. These groups stemmed from a wave of religious revivalism, practitioners believing that it was their duty to God to help others and perfect society, an ideology expanded dramatically by progressives. Due to the action of temperance supporters, many states enacted their own prohibition laws by the start of the Civil War. Founded in Cleveland, Ohio in 1874, the Women's Christian Temperance Union aimed to draw attention to the connection between alcoholism and domestic violence. Initially protesting through pray-ins in taverns, the group shifted to educational campaigns and eventually more destructive measures. One of its most famous members was Carrie Nation, who was known to attack saloons with a hatchet.
Good morning. How may I serve you today? Why are you doing this? For temperance!
The WCTU's presidents, Ann Wittenmeyer and later Frances Willard, were in good standing with the suffragist movement, helping it become the largest women's organization in the world in 1890. Another notorious institution was the Anti-Saloon League, established in Oberlin, Ohio in 1893. Led by Wayne Wheeler, the coalition formed in response to the rise of saloon culture, which they deemed corrupt and immoral. As the ASL gained more support from various groups across the nation, Wheeler adopted the idea of an 18th Amendment, which would enact a nationwide prohibition.
Mr. Wheeler, sorry, I love this organization you got going here, but
Yes.
I do have a bit of a concern.
What is it?
Well, it seems that we support both the Ku Klux Klan and also the NAACP. Don't you think that's a bit odd?
No, not specifically.
Well, we also support laborers, but when push comes to shove, we're there for the industrialists. It just seems we're playing both sides, you know?
Well, they all support our cause, don't they?
With the U.S.'s entry into World War I in 1917, the ASL spread propaganda that fueled anti-German sentiment, causing the public to connect the German-originating beer industry with treason. That same year, through increased political backing, the 18th Amendment was proposed by the federal government. It would be economically feasible, as passage of the 16th Amendment 6 years earlier provided an income tax that eliminated the need for alcohol to gain government revenue. Like all amendments, the 18th had to pass through both the House of Representatives and the Senate with a two-third majority vote. Once an amendment has passed in both houses, it is sent to the states for approval, becoming law when 3/4 of the states ratify it.
The 18th Amendment was different from other amendments in that a 7-year time limit was put in place for ratification. This turned out to be unnecessary, as a 3/4 majority was reached in only 11 months. President Woodrow Wilson vetoed the bill, but it was quickly overrode by Congress. So, on January 16, 1919, the National Prohibition Act, also known as the Volstead Act, through the championing of Chairman of the House Judiciary Committee Andrew Volstead, was ratified, coming into effect a year later. It detailed the new restrictions on, quote, intoxicating liquors, and how the government could enforce them, permitting raids on suspected speakeasies and detainment of those caught violating the law.
Oh, a new amendment. How does this... You know, it's strange. This doesn't say anything about privately consuming, selling, or manufacturing your own liquor.
Look over there!
Huh? Hey!
Throughout the 1920s, the amendment was generally more enforced in areas where people liked the new law, such as in rural areas and small towns, but it was applied more loosely in cities. Progress showed in the first few years of Prohibition. there was a decline in drunken arrests and a 30% decrease in alcohol consumption. Despite this, many citizens continued to drink, often inventing creative ways to hide their liquor, such as utilizing hip flasks and hollow canes.
We're raiding the place!
Oh, knock it off, officer. You know I'm clean.
Alright, ma'am. You're in the clear.
Bootlegging, or the illegal manufacture and sale of liquor, became a major source of profit for many businessmen. Early bootleggers smuggled their product from the Canadian and Mexican borders, from the coasts, and from islands such as the Bahamas, Cuba, and St. Pierre and Miquelon. Bootlegged alcohol that had been distilled, including corn-based whiskey, colloquially called moonshine, was sold at speakeasies, which were secret stores and nightclubs. The public also made their own liquor at home, many informally making bathtub gin. Because of high liquor prices, the poor and working class often could not afford to join in on breaking the law. As bootlegging became more widespread, so did organized crime. Bootleggers gained a great deal of wealth from their brewing, distilling, and sale of liquor, eventually forming gangs that would compete with one another for distribution territory.
That was a close one. Cops almost popped a good one in our asses.
I ain't going back to jail again.
It's alright, bud. Now that we got the goods, we're making it big time. By the by, you got 'em, right?
Uh-huh. Only the best for the boss.
Notorious gangster and Italian mafia boss Al Capone raked in $60 million annually from bootlegging and speakeasies, his wealth estimated at $100 million in 1927. On St. Valentine's Day, 1929 in Chicago, men associated with Capone who were dressed as policemen shot and killed men from a rival gang, a demonstration of the extreme violence the mafia practiced in order to remain in power. Capone's reign was one of the greatest in the mafia's history, coming to an end with his arrest in 1932 for income tax evasion. Other well-known gangsters were Dion O'Banion, Joe Masseria, Mayor Lansky, Lucky Luciano, and Bugsy Siegel.
Prohibition brought about many unintended consequences. Numerous businesses were forced to close because they couldn't make profit off of liquor. Thousands died from contaminated cheap moonshine and alcohol that had been poisoned by the government in order to lessen illegal consumption. State revenues shrank as they had previously benefited from liquor taxes. The cost for law enforcement, arrests, and imprisonments took its toll on the U.S.'s economy. With the start of the Great Depression in 1929, support for Prohibition had dwindled, and the government soon realized that the alcohol industry would help create jobs.
Franklin D. Roosevelt went against President Herbert Hoover in 1932, who had referred to Prohibition as the great social and economic experiment, noble in motive and far-reaching in purpose. In February 1933, Congress adopted the 21st Amendment, which would end Prohibition in its entirety. In March, FDR signed the Cullen-Harrison Act, which amended the Volstead Act and permitted the sale of low-alcohol beer and wines in order to gather revenue. The 21st Amendment was ratified, and Prohibition ended nationally on December 5, 1933. Some states would continue to ban alcohol, but all had stopped by 1966.
I, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, declare Prohibition over.
Well, I learned nothing.
Today, Americans consume more alcohol per capita than the pre-Prohibition population. Drinking has become something glamorous, many idolizing those who ignored the law during the 1920s and 30s. Prohibition highlighted unfair restrictions on black people and immigrants, and these racial divisions continue in the modern age. Hate groups like the KKK and the Nativist Party used Prohibition as leeway for targeting drinking by their enemies. The law aided marginalized communities in banding together and fighting against oppression, many becoming Democrats that pushed for the movement's end. The era expanded federal law enforcement powers, as well as bringing about the rise of organized crime.
Nevertheless, citizens are understanding the harmful effects of alcohol. Gen Z is considered the driest generation, and recent studies have shown that alcohol is linked to cancer. Prohibition showed how the temperance movement had failed to keep people from drinking, instead exacerbating an already pressing issue. It teaches us that we mustn't experiment with the Constitution, and that it is important to think of the consequences when trying to fix society.